would like to talk to you about providing water to calves in the wintertime. So we all know that providing water to animals is important, but we also understand that providing water in the winter can be a challenge because it's cold, it wants to freeze, and nobody likes dealing with frozen water buckets. So today, I would like to spend some time discussing why providing water is important and why it's worth it, especially in the wintertime, and then cover a few strategies for managing water in the winter that hopefully make it less of a headache. So starting off, for why providing water is important and worth it in the wintertime, number one is pretty obvious, is to prevent dehydration. Dehydration is the number one cause of mortality in dairy calves. It's been that way for a long time. It's likely going to stay that way for a while. You'd be hard pressed to find a simpler or more cost-effective option at preventing dehydration than simply providing water. Number two, rumen bacteria require water to grow. We know that rumen development is important. Along with that comes proliferation of rumen bacteria. This is all important for development of that calf's digestive tract. Number three is calf starter intake. We know that water consumption and starter intake are highly correlated. Calves are going to consume about 3 to 4 pounds of water per pound of starter. This is an appreciable amount of water. And so if we expect calves to start consuming feed early in life and consuming appreciable quantities of feed, we need to make sure that we're providing them with the water necessary to hit those levels of intake. So starter intake is really important because it's really going to drive rumen fermentation and rumen development. So on the note of rumen fermentation, we should also consider what are some products of rumen fermentation. Well, one product that's particularly important in the wintertime is heat production. So calves consume starter, it goes into the rumen, bacteria start breaking it down, we have ruminal fermentation, and that produces heat. That's why cattle, their thermoneutral zone is lower than humans. They're comfortable at colder temperatures than we are because they have this big fermentation vat in the rumen, and that's helping to produce heat. Well, we can see how this is really important for calves in the wintertime when they're cold. And so we get that starter intake really revved up, we get the rumen going, it's gonna help keep our calves warmer in the wintertime. Now, all of this culminates in a heavier calf. One study showed that calves provided water were 38% heavier after just 4 weeks compared to those that were not provided water. So now that we've covered a few reasons on why providing water is important and why it's worth it in the wintertime, let's discuss a few management strategies for providing water in the winter that hopefully make it less of a headache. For those that feed water and milk in the same pail, one of the worst things that we can do is dump milk on top of a block of ice. That's going to cool the milk. Calves don't like it. It's just a bad situation in general. And if we're feeding water in buckets, we don't want to have to bust ice every single day. We understand that. So one option is more calf focused based on individual calves and their age. So generally speaking, we have an idea of how much water a calf is going to consume each day. And so we can take this into account and we can provide calves with that specific amount of water that they should consume before it freezes. Another option that's a little bit more simple is to provide calves with a set amount of water, a little bit more water. We know it's going to be more than enough for them to have their fill, and come back in an hour or so and dump what's remaining. This gives calves plenty of time to consume what they want without leaving any left over to freeze. And at the end of the day, I would encourage people to be flexible. So stay up to date on what the weather is going to be, what the temperature is going to be day to day. You might have some days that it doesn't drop below freezing. You might have some weeks where it doesn't drop below freezing. And you should consider this when it comes to our water feeding strategies. There could be situations where it's above freezing in the daylight hours, and so calves have water in front of them the entire time that it's daylight, but it freezes at night. And so after that evening feeding, we can do one of the water limit feeding strategies that we had discussed so that we don't have to deal with ice the next morning. So these are just a few options or a few reasons on why providing water to calves is important, why it's especially beneficial and worth it in the wintertime, and a few management strategies to help make that a little bit easier.